Hey everyone, it's February 12th, which means I just recorded session number 2 with Remy today in the mentoring series. I have 3 mentees and they all have very different things that they want to work on, but they're all in tech, they're all software developers. And so it's been interesting seeing their journeys even just between sessions 1 and 2. And so I'll continue scheduling sessions. I want this series to be about 6 to 9 sessions for each mentee and see how they progress over that time. So what you're about to see is the unedited live stream Twitch VOD from earlier. There's chat showing alongside it. It's usually pretty minimal for that time, even though we do read through the input after the sessions happen. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learned something from this, and thanks for watching. Cool. So thank you for being on the stream, Remy. I am going to switch to our document. I see you have a bunch of stuff listed in here. Do you want to get started, or do you want me to kind of, probe around and figure things out? How do you feel?
I'm thinking I can start if you want.
Sure.
I've listed the topics that we went through last time, so I guess I'll just start at the top, which is trainings. A quick recap. I feel like I don't have enough time for trainings because of the workload, but I think I want to develop myself in, even though my employer, my manager are saying, take the time for trainings. So I asked around my colleagues if they take any time off for trainings, like you mentioned. And I ended up talking quite a bit to the senior developer of my team, and he said he is actually taking an entire week off to go on a training course somewhere at the start of Q2, I believe, for .NET Blazor, because there's a technology we want to move into with Azure and stuff like that. Uh, and he is also echoing a bit what I'm saying, that he feels like he should be doing more trainings, but that he feels like he doesn't really have the time. So it is an opinion that my team shares with me, but they do seem more willing or easier make a transition towards doing a training.
Okay. So did that help normalize it for you a bit to hear this person is taking time off? Do you feel now that you're more empowered to do it, or do you feel like, oh, someone else is struggling with this too?
A bit of both. I feel like, like if he's also struggling with it, like he's someone I look to a lot. So I feel like, if he's struggling with it, then how can this be an easy thing for me is what I feel. But he also said, like if this proves to be a useful training for me, then probably more members of our team will follow the same training. So it will be not necessarily mandatory to do it, uh, but it will incite us to do it as well.
Yeah. My concern here is that this is about the specific training that this person's about to do with .NET Blazor. If they end up liking it and then they say, hey, this is great, the whole team should do it, the whole team might do it, but that won't help you when you're like, well, I'm struggling with whatever, unit tests or writing documentation. I want to go do a book or a course on that. And so for those things, have you talked to other people? I know you said you talked quite a bit with the senior developer. Have you talked to other people on the team and how they do trainings? Have you taken a pulse on that?
Yeah, I talked with another colleague as well, who's on the same level as me, and he said he used to do more trainings, but that he's also stopped doing them because of workload.
I see. But in neither with the developer who is your current level or the senior developer, did either of them feel like there was some downside to taking trainings? I know they're busy right now, and so that's why they don't necessarily want to do more. But did they feel like they were punished or somehow something bad happened?
No, no, not at all. Like if they always come out of a training feeling like, okay, it was worth the time investment.
Okay. Okay, well, so you mentioned that I believe there was a book that you'd wanted to go through. Is that right? Or a course on
No. Yeah,
yeah, and
Pluralsight
Pluralsight.
courses on
Yeah.
C++. plus plus.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was the Pluralsight course. Do you feel like you're more willing to sign up for it now?
No, not really, I'd say.
Okay. And so in your mind, what's essentially stopping you from doing that?
Because I still feel like I would lose productivity time. It's the start of the year, so I went through my year planning with my manager, and we set some goals for this year. And like I don't think I really kept space in there to do training. So like I got a pretty big schedule already, and I'm like, okay, we're already halfway through Q1. I got these targets I want to hit at the end of Q1, and I'm already feeling like I'm falling behind on that. So I'm like, okay, how can I take time off to do training now?
I see.
If that makes sense.
You said you did your yearly planning. I recognize that Q1, it's the calendar year you're talking about Q1 for, right? So,
Yeah.
and okay, yeah. Because sometimes people are talking about fiscal year and I can't know what that quarter would have been. But so end of the end of March. So you essentially have a month and a half left. Let's say we
Yeah.
didn't change any of your plans for that. How much of Q2 is already set in stone and how much could be flexible?
I think Q2 is a bit more flexible. Right now, I got one gigantic scope planned for that, basically. It's doing some migrations to the cloud from on-premise servers and stuff like that. So that's going to be a big chunk of my time with a third party supporting us with it. But I do feel there's a bit more flexibility then.
Okay. And this course would take you about a week to do, right?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Let's say we wave a magic wand and Q2 all of a sudden has an extra week in it, but you're the only person who gets it. Everyone else is somehow still living their lives normally. Would you take that week to do the course?
That's a tough one. I would like to say yes, but knowing myself, I would probably do no. Because I'd probably like, oh, nice, I can use this week to work on X instead.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what I was thinking is that there's essentially this pressure will probably not let up. My hope was that you would talk to other people. They would say, "Oh yeah, we do trainings all the time," or "Yeah, it's going to feel uncomfortable, but you just have to do it," and that you might feel the motivation to do it yourself. If that hasn't happened, then I don't think it's naturally going to happen at this point, and there's no one else you could really talk to. It basically comes down to weighing how important is this course for you? How important are future learnings or courses you might need to take? And what is the cost? And I would say this, you saw how all this code jam stuff went. A lot of people who've never done a code jam before probably don't get what the benefit might be, and myself included. I didn't understand why people would even do them. They just seemed like, now that's a deviation from a main project I would do, which is pretty much exactly what you're saying about this. There's other work you want to do. You're already signed up for Q1. And yet, if you never try it, you'll never know how it could go. So I wonder if there's a way for you to do part of the course. So maybe a week is too big a time. Could we maybe pursue it from that angle of could we get you to do, 30% of the course, enough for you to know that it's providing value or it's not, and carve out 30% of the time, so I guess about a day and a half. Is that more feasible?
Yeah, I think it might be because actually, something I just went through my mind is that last year I did a training that was 2 times 2 days,
Mm-hmm.
spread out over like 3 months, I think, which was aimed towards more personal development stuff. And actually, at my year planning with my manager, I told him, hey, I want to do the second part of that course, or the next level, I would should say. Like it's 3 tiers to that course, like personal development. I did the first one, and I was like, hey, manager, I really like that. There's a second level to it, which is 3 days, I think. Can I do this? Can we like make space for this? Uh, and I don't know how, but somehow in my mind, I was able to reason that to myself more easily because more self-development focused, which
Yeah.
I feel like I have a harder time doing myself. Whereas like actual hard skills development focus, I feel like, I can just uh, struggle my way through it until I can do the thing I need to do.
So in my mind, both are personal development, but you're saying that the one that's easier for you to swallow is the one where it's soft skills?
Yeah, because I feel like I need an external force for me to improve that. Whereas like, C++ is the hard coding skills I want to improve. I feel like, as long as I still work on this code base, my C++ skills will also advance on my own.
Yeah, I see. Okay. So let me summarize. You had taken a 2-day course that was part one of many, and you'd like to do the second one. You already saw value in the first one. This is a
Yeah.
step up in terms of days as well. It's going to be 3 days. You have some flexibility in Q2. However, so there are two things. One, I would definitely say you should talk to your manager. It sounded like they were on board then. It sounds like they'll be on board now, and say, I'd like to take 3 days. You yourself know how this works. Maybe it's 3 days. You could do, one here and two there or something. Maybe you want to take them contiguously. I don't know. Figure that out. But then the part I wanted to talk about after that, though, so I'll write this down. Like suggestion is sign up in Q2 for the second part, and then the other thing I wanted to talk about though is you did mention there was a technical course on Pluralsight for C sharp, and that's what's hard to convince yourself to do. So here's my approach for this. Just like last time, my approach was essentially talk to other people, see if they're like, oh, we know exactly what your struggle is. Here's what you got to do. They didn't set you on that course. That's fine. But now my plan is going to be I want you to see if this plan in Q2 works and then take off a bite-sized portion of a technical thing that you can do later. So if this works for you, then we'll aim to do, 30% of a C sharp course or something like that in Q3. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, I can definitely try that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll say we can aim to tackle like 30% of a C sharp course in Q3. Yeah. And I'll write a star here so that we can come back to that. Yeah, and that way at least we have a plan, because like I said, this is kind of how mentoring works. I get inputs from you and then I find out about the conclusions of those things from you, because I'm not looking into your career, I don't work at your company. And so for something like this, we'll try this out, and if it ends up working, then cool, we can just keep trying new things, and I think we can eventually get there. Because otherwise, here's my concern is, like you said, your skills can improve just by doing C sharp or just by doing the C++ project that you have, but the question is efficiency and speed. Maybe it would take you, just to make up numbers, 2 months to get better at C++ to the point where you can do the task you need to do. But maybe if you took a course, it would take you a week. So it's hard to say. And that's my only concern there. And if it's not a concern of yours, then I'm not going to try to, foist my concerns onto you. But okay, I think that sounds good. Do you want to move on
I
to
agree.
some of the other things that you'd written down here?
Yeah. Yep. Let's go on. That's fine.
Okay. I think it's this
So
part.
yeah, no, so that's still to do with the training. So we had to hire in colleagues. I don't know how you call it in English, especially. So they're like external forces that, we're supposed to be here for 2 years, but because of budget cuts, we're losing them again.
Yeah,
Which just increases the workload, which makes it even harder for me to validate losing time
I see.
to myself.
Okay.
Yeah, contractors, that's the word. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry.
Hello, cat.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear the jingling. She's got a bell on her collar.
I can hear
You
it.
can. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, contractors. I think this happens in a lot of companies where either layoffs happen or there are, yeah, contractors don't renew their contract, something like that. And the problem I've seen, it's this classic thing of there's too much work, and the only solutions are get more people or reduce the workload. And that's never what companies usually do. They usually try solution number three, which is get more work out of their existing workload or their existing workforce. And that's just not sustainable for people. It works for short terms, right? If you want to do that for a week, okay, fine. But yeah, if you try that for a month or a year, you just burn people out. So you said it's making you hard. It's harder to justify taking the training. How do you feel about your day-to-day work though? Do you feel like there's too much, or now there's way more pressure?
Well, I definitely think that like the pressure is increasing. I don't think like it's way too much that I will burn out or anything.
Yeah,
And it is a concern I'm also voicing to my manager and so are my colleagues, and he's acknowledging it, and trying to get budget for like another contractor or something.
yeah.
So I think it's still manageable, but that's because we're already like saying, hey, we can't pick up this task because we just don't have the workforce.
Yeah, I see. Okay. It sounds like then this is the healthy enough setup. Manager's aware of it. You're not being burned out or anything. The other thing, by the way, these can create opportunities for people. I've seen a lot of people who want to get into management or want to get promoted. Their existing manager takes a vacation, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, long enough to create a vacuum in the team. So when you take a vacation for a day, that doesn't happen, right? The person comes back, they just pick up their work. But for a month, someone needs to pick up the slack. And a lot of times it'll be that person rising to the occasion, proving they can do it, and then getting promoted for it. Is there any sort of opportunity like that here where you feel like, I could more smartly handle this work, or I could delegate to other people who aren't being utilized efficiently? Is there any opportunity there?
No, no, not really, because the team is small enough that everybody's got their own task and fully committed to that one task.
Yeah, people are on their own tasks. Yeah. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And if there is that opportunity, I mean, this could be one of the other things we're presumably going to talk about is that custom role that we mentioned. And so this could be a way of sort of proving, hey, look, I can provide value here. And maybe this is going to be a difficult point for us to figure out that custom role eventually if there aren't these opportunities where you can prove there's value ahead of time, ahead of that 6 year timeline that your manager is eventually going to retire. So I'll not try to skip ahead. Let's, I guess, cover things one at a time. So
Yep, that's fine.
I'm very intrigued by this next bit because I saw some of the output. The releasing something is hard. Why don't you start
Yeah,
with this? Yeah.
yeah. So quick recap again. Something I struggle with is getting the last 10% done. to the point where I just usually don't get it done. I'm very excited for something. I work on it for days, weeks, months, however long I'm excited for it. And then there's like that last 10%, fixing the small bugs, getting documentation done, the last small features, whatever is needed to like get a polished product. And I just flatline. I quit. I don't do anything. So I posted in Discord. I'm gonna release it next weekend. I, just get it out there so I would have some accountability for it. I told some people about the speedrunning note application I was working on, and I ended up releasing it. I ended up not doing 10%, but more like 40% because, I was like, oh, like if I do this, I can also add this, and I can work on this, and I kept adding on, creating a new 10% for me, so to
Yeah.
speak. And I don't think I completed the entirety of the 10% I still had in mind. But because, I posted something silly in Discord, like, throw me out of Jump Royale if I don't publish this or something. I was like, okay, I'm gonna release this because, it's out there. Uh, and I think it ended up well. I posted about it in some speedrunning discords. I don't think anyone used it yet, but there were some people that were like, "Hey, is this feature support? Because if it is, I would like to try it out."
Hmm.
So I did get feedback on, what it would take for me to implement for people to start using it. So that's nice.
Okay. Let me write down some questions I have before I forget. Okay, so first, how was your mentality for that last 10%, which really ended up being 40%? Was it a look, I committed to this, fine, and you're still dragging yourself to do it? How did you feel during that time?
It was a mix of things. I was like, okay, I've committed to this, so I got to do it. Then once I started working on it, I was like, oh, I can implement this, and I got to doing new things. I was really excited. Then it started to die down when I got to the new last 10%. I was like, okay, really got to do this now. There's no way out anymore. Uh, it also made me feel a bit vulnerable or something that I'm putting out there that I've created. It's like, showing the world like, hey, I made this, and I was like, oh, what if people, hate it, or they're like, oh, your code sucks, or something like that. I think that was is a bit, that kept me back as well, as I'm like, okay, I'm putting something that's mine. I've spent a lot of energy and time in this out there. How will people receive it?
Yeah.
Uh, which was a bit of, I don't know, a weird feeling of like vulnerability or something. I think I should call it.
Yeah, no, that is definitely there. Look, I think you've seen enough of people talking in chat about, hey, when do I get over imposter syndrome? When do these feelings of inadequacy die down? And I don't think they're ever totally gone. I think whenever you are working on something or there's something close enough to you and you've put a lot of time into it and you're about to put it out there, you wonder, yeah, what's going to happen with this? What will people say? And to some extent, I think this is very similar to public speaking. And you said you could put me in a hall in front of a bunch of people and I could talk about a blade of grass. And so you don't have that same hesitation around that. And yet, for a lot of people, it's like, hey, I worked up for a very long time on a presentation or on a speech and I got to nail this. I got to do this exactly the right way. And so somehow there's got to be a link there between those two different kinds of, quote unquote performances when you speak or when you produce something out to the world. And like I kind of alluded to earlier, I don't think that nervousness or that trepidation, I don't think that ever totally goes away, but I think there are ways that you can mitigate it. But what I'm building is a mental picture of, let me write something else down here. It may also be the fear of how it's received. So I'm building a mental picture of what is actually the problem here, because you mentioned that once you'd committed, you uphold your word enough to the point where that was motivating for you. And then you built
Hmm.
momentum. And then you lost
Yeah.
momentum because you came to a new 10%. So I'm thinking that the real fear around this 10% is a combination of how the project's going to be received, and also that I think your 10% is not really the last 10%. So I think there's a combination of both trivializing it, oh, it's just 10%, but also building it way up in your head of, no, but that's really 90%. So I think what we need to do is we need to sort of prioritize exactly what's in that last 10%, and then also exploit that the commitment worked for you. So the next time you
Hmm.
want to do something like this, commit to it, try things out. I also at some point want to talk about body doubling. So let me not throw a million different thoughts at you. How do you feel about that first one, which is that it's not really 10% and you know it? Is that a factor in kind of scaring you away from doing this?
It may be a bit because I'm aware that I'm, hitting this wall that I always run up to. So I'm maybe making it bigger in my head than it really is.
Yeah. Um, and he thinks so.
Like because I just because I like I know I flatlined at that point so often. I kind of dread it because I'm working towards something. I'm like, oh, am I gonna stall again when I get to the parts I don't want to do?
Yeah. Yeah. Worry about stalling too. Yeah. Toward the end. Okay. So in this case, you said it was more like 40%. Could you have seen, like, if you'd thought about it, let's say you didn't do any, quote unquote, coding work, real work like that. If you just thought about it, could you have determined that this is actually more like 40% than like 10%?
I could if I had accepted that it wouldn't be as fully fledged as it is now. So like the 40% was made up because I started adding features again
Yeah,
that weren't necessary.
I see.
So I could have, thought to myself, okay, if I release it as it is, then I could have foreseen that it was just 10%. And I like sat down and think, okay, what more do I want to add? I could have made it, 300% more.
Okay, and does that frequently happen for you that last 10% expands in the same way that you're like, well, actually, in order to release this now, this part looks like it's a
Yeah.
flaw. Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. The closer I get to the end, the more scope creep I am willing to accept.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so theory, this is related to the whole how will this be received? And so now I wonder if we can press on that point a little bit more. What if you had released this in a beta state? So you were at the, let's say you were originally at 90%, you had 10% left. Let's say you released it at a 95% or even at 90%. How would you feel about it being out there in beta and just getting feedback from people?
Ooh, I don't know because I feel like, the whole beta thing is a bit voided nowadays, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, always beta, and it's just an excuse to not finish anything. So I try to stay away from it myself, for like doing betas and stuff like that, because I feel like it's an easy out. Like, oh, it's not finished yet, so it's broken.
Yeah.
Deal with it. But I can see the use of it for getting early feedback.
Yeah. So when I had asked you originally about what has motivated you in the past, you said, a project that could make some money, setting a particular date, telling people about the project. And so all of these things are things we can try. In this case, a beta is telling people about the project and telling them it's not fully finished yet. And yet, look at what you actually did when you released it. You shared it in speedrunning discords and you got feedback. Like you said, maybe those people aren't really using it, but maybe they would after they got the feature requests in. And that's a decision for you to make if you want to code those. But how is that really different from a beta? You essentially put your product out there and you heard feedback and they said, hey, maybe when you do this, I might use it. It's pretty similar, right?
I guess it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't think about it like that, but I just slapped a V1 on it, so it's not a beta in my mind, but
I
you
agree.
could
I
consider
agree.
it
And
as a beta.
I don't mean this in a bad way. Like you
I understand, I
produced a beta.
understand.
Yeah. It's more like if we can press on this fear of how it's going to be received. And what beta does is it essentially takes your bar from here down to here for when you're looking at a product. It takes a lot of that critical thinking out of it of what could be improved or where are the rough edges. And they're just like, well, it's going to get better. I wonder if we could do that too. So a lot of what I kind of propose here is, hey, let's try to come up with a strategy. Let's try to apply it. And so in your course and training case, it's going to be in Q2. Let's try doing that 3-day training and we'll see how that goes. In Q3, maybe we can try a technical training and see how that goes. With something like this, I think it's where else can we think of releasing something? And when it's a personal project, you get to choose if it's in beta. For professional projects, it doesn't probably work that way for you. Uh, so how would you feel if we rewound a few months and I'm like, Remy, your homework is release your speedrunning notes thing in beta and tell people in discords about it? How would you feel now that like this is already done, I guess, but put ourselves in that hypothetical?
I could see myself saying, let's do it, let's release a beta and get some early feedback on it. I
Yeah.
think I would be fine with that.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, that's another tool, I think, and we can look at that. I think that this clearly worked for you. You did release the thing, and that's what you wanted to do, and you didn't say it was outright bad. You said you built momentum on it, and you were excited, and you were adding new features. That's another thing we can try to consider, which is how do we make that last 10% more amenable? And maybe we say, look, there's some amount of inflation that's allowed. It can go up to 40%, and half of it has to be fun. I want to add these features, and half of it has to be the things that actually need to be done. Oh, this bug needs to be fixed, documentation. So yeah, maybe change up the mix of how that last 10% inflates with a combination of fun tasks and necessary tasks. All right, there we go. And then the stalling toward the end. So this is somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You are worried about that last 10%, and you're worried about it because you might stall on it. And yet in the past, you've stalled on it, and then you don't get these projects done. And so now you have a fear of something that's always happened in the past. And anyway, this is why we try a forcing function to just move you past that, because a worry in this case is not like, hey, what if the plane falls apart while I'm in the air? That's a worry that could result in death or something like that, right? Or injury. This is not that kind of worry. This is a
No.
like a just a holding you back kind of worry. So I think we should also keep an eye on that too. Um, so okay, yeah, I think the toolbox has been somewhat expanded here with the whole commitment and with betas. Do you have any other projects that are along these lines?
Yeah, the CodeGem thing I did.
Yeah.
I want to expand that, and I actually took the lessons I guess I took from speedrun notes into this. So I already told one of my root builder friends about it. I showed him like the gift that was also in the repository. I showed it to him. I'm like, hey, would you like to use this?
Hmm.
And give me some early feedback on it. So he knows about it, and he's probably going to ask me about it at some point if I don't show him. So that's going to give me, I hope, the accountability that I need to keep working on it.
Okay, good. Yeah, and you said you wanted to turn this into a sellable product, right? Okay, is that a how do I say this? Like, is that a goal that you've now committed to in your mind, or it's just like a well, if my path takes me there, I that's the eventual goal I might want.
Yeah, that is something I want to commit to, and I've been thinking about how can I make this from a goal to a target, so to say.
Yeah,
Like a goal you can go for, but a target you really want to hit. So I'm thinking, how can I actually realize this? Like, what do I need beyond just my coding skills, for example?
yeah. Uh, so let me think about this. I think that you mentioned something a while ago where you mentioned like a $6 price tag on something. Had that was a shader pack that you'd sold through the Unity Asset Store, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you have experience releasing something that was a monetized product, but that was through another storefront essentially. Is that part of the concern for this, which is how do I actually just sell direct to business or consumer?
I think it's more of like the company management behind everything. Like I got close ties to Boulder Halls already, so I know customers
Yeah.
or potential customers, I should say. But if I want to legally sell something, I should probably like have a company behind it. How do I market it? How do I get it fully fledged so I can actually sell it, have some kind of subscription to it, make it sustainable.
Yeah.
Like everything around just delivering the software part is what I'm trying to think about. Like what do I need? How do I face these challenges?
Okay. And how open are you to getting someone else to help with some of this? Essentially a co-founder sort of position.
Yeah, very. Because I've actually been thinking about this as well. Some connections of mine have their own companies, so I was willing, like maybe I could go to them and ask them, hey, what kind of route did you follow when you released your first product? Like, and are you willing to maybe help me out with this?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think there is a saying that I've always liked, which is that a pig and a chicken are both committed to breakfast, but in very different ways. A chicken provides eggs, but a pig provides bacon. It's itself. So it dies for breakfast, essentially. And there's
Yeah,
that level of commitment that I think you need to consider out of someone who's helping you. So if it's someone who has their own company and is giving you help, they're essentially a chicken in that scenario. They're, laying an egg and passing it along to you. If they're a co-founder who's part of your company, then they're a pig in that case. They're like, I'm in, I'm,
yeah,
I'm somehow committed or I'm somehow invested. And the reason I like that is because you really need someone like you are a pig now, no matter what. In this case, you're giving your all in this company, and you're putting something on the line: your time, your money, maybe connections that you have. Maybe you might sour some goodwill if this goes south. Who knows? There's something you're investing in this, and when you want someone else to help you through these and make decisions, they typically need to be invested too. And just friendship is enough reason to be invested to some extent, and then that takes you so far, and maybe that's all the help you need. So I'd say to be open to this. You said you are already, but I'd say to maybe like, ask these people kind of explicitly, hey, here's the help I need. Would you be willing to advise? Would you be willing to help co-found the company? And just see what routes are there for you, because this could go any number of ways. People start businesses, every way you could ever think of. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I think it's a really cool project idea, and I think that there's got to be a need. We could get into some of the more business stuff like doing competitive analysis and everything, but I'll just say for now, like,
But that's actually
yeah,
something that is a bit further on, like the new topics.
yeah,
One thing I did there was like creating a design document, sticking to MVP, failing fast, that kind of stuff.
yep, okay, cool,
Is
yeah,
something that I put in the new topics if you want to touch on that later or maybe
yeah,
in next session or something.
sure. Um, Okay, let me just kind of refresh my memory on what we just talked about, though, just to see if there's anything else I had to say, because there's quite a lot there. You want to make a sellable product. Yeah, so when it comes to planning this stuff, I think you're still in the development phase, and that's familiar enough to you. And I think that eventually you will get into that last 10%. And the last 10% for a business could potentially expand almost infinitely. And so at some point, we're going to need to apply some of these techniques that we've learned about how do you get a product out there that people are paying for and then improve it as they're using it, because that's generally how a lot of subscription software works nowadays, is get some customers, start getting feedback. And yeah, I'm excited for you, by the way. I think this is great. And
Thank you.
yeah, I don't know, had you been thinking about a route builder software thing for a while, or
So no, actually no. The game jam is actually what triggered the idea. I was like, okay, I want to participate. What do I want to work on? I don't want it to be something flaky, so to speak,
yeah,
like something I make and throw away. I wanted it to like have meaning to me. And I don't even know where this idea came from. I was just talking to a root setter, I think, when I came up with it. I'm like, oh, I could probably make a really small MVP pretty quickly for the game jam out of this,
yeah,
and then see where I can take it from there. And I just started thinking about it more seriously, and I started doing some searches like, does something like this exist? I couldn't find anything. And I'm like, okay, it is a niche hole in the market, I think, that
wow.
has real use cases.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It's especially amazing because since it was my code jam idea, that means I get 95% of your company. But that's fine. We can talk about the details later and how you'll remit the cash to me.
Okay,
No,
but I'll get to pet the cat for it.
yeah, you'll what? Oh, the patent?
I'll get no, I'll get pet the cat for the
Oh, pet a
95%.
cat. Yeah, that'll be the payment. I'm really happy for you. I think this is great. I think it's good also because it's something you're excited about and something clearly you want to build up. So I think, yeah, that's amazing. I wanted to ask you one other thing that I'd written down from earlier. You said that 10% of your project expanded to 40%. What was your motivation for adding those features? Was it more about this is necessary? Was it more about this is fun? I'm just curious about what was going through your head.
I think both fun. I really enjoyed working on those features. Some of the things were things I had never tried before, so
Yeah,
it was fun, engaging, learning new stuff. And the other part was just I wanted to make a more polished product than I had at the starting point.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Because one of the things I'm thinking about is if they were just fun, I think that's what's easy to do a lot of times on personal projects is pursue things for fun. And then at the end of it, you're like, well, I have a sprawling set of things and it was fun to work on. But yeah, how do I turn this into a product or release it? And so, okay. Yeah, you got kind of both in mind there. Okay. Yeah. So body doubling is next. I think we'll loop back to a lot of what we just talked about with us starting a business. But yeah, let's.
Yeah. So I tried body doubling with some friends first. They ended up playing games. That doesn't work at all for body doubling. It just distracts. So I tried it in the Discord once. I intended to do it more, just join the Discord channel, put a message out there, hey, I'm doing body doubling if you want to join.
Yeah.
But I ended up being sick for an entire week, like pretty much directly after that, and I didn't really get an opportunity to try it since.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, it is something I want to try again at some point for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's worthwhile to do. And I think if you were to post on Discord far enough in advance, and you already have kind of touched on this, but if you were to say something like this Saturday at this time, we're gonna just be in a voice call together working on something productive. I think you would get someone who's interested, and I think that it would probably be beneficial for both of you. And I definitely think it's worth a shot. So yeah, I hope you do it, and I might even join
Yeah,
in too. Yeah,
I'll try it, planning it in advance. Like last time I did, it was like, hey, I'm doing this now.
yeah, yeah.
And I think someone actually replied like, hey, if I knew this in advance, I would have, been there. Uh, so I will try that.
Yep. Got it. Far enough in advance. Okay. Remy said he'll try this out. Okay, cool. So let's see. I know we talked about a lot of this stuff. Trying to host body doubling session in Discord, and I want to. I'll put another star here. Okay. So yeah, next up, talking to manager.
Just taking a drink there.
Oh, yep. Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't end up talking with my manager directly, mostly because like I said, I've been sick for a week. Our schedules in the office didn't really line up, and he's just been busy with year start things. Who I did talk to is my senior developer, who
Mm-hmm.
used to be in the position of my manager.
Yeah.
So before my manager became my current manager, he was the manager of the entire ICT department. He took a step down to my team's manager, and my then team's manager took the senior position.
Yeah.
So they both like kind of stepped down. And I just asked him like, hey, how did this function look like for you? Did it look the same as it does for the current manager? Did it look different? Because my senior developer, he's more of a coding guy and less of a contracting guy, so to speak. And he told me like, oh no, like when I did it, it was way different. He was like maybe like 10%, 15% of my work was contract management, and he just did the contracts for like his own team.
Yeah.
Whereas my current manager has like probably 40, 50% of his work is contract management and stuff like that. Because he does it for the entire ICT department. So I asked him how come, was there a shift in his mentality? Is it because he wanted to do it? And he told me when my now senior developer used to be in management, there was actually a dedicated person for contract management,
Mm-hmm.
but that role got cut because of budget constraints at some point. Uh, so my now manager just took it over because it's something he doesn't mind doing, and someone needed to do it. So he stepped up to the plate to do it himself, but not because the function necessarily mandates it. My current senior developer also said, like probably like 3/4 of these contracts should be managed by their own teams anyway, and not by my current manager. But he just does it because it's work he doesn't mind doing.
Yeah. Okay. There's a lot that's interesting here. For one, you can kind of see what I mentioned earlier about there being a vacuum and someone rising to the opportunity, and in this case, they they didn't mind, so it was okay, right? I don't think you ever want to rise to an opportunity where you are going to regret being in that opportunity then after kind of taking it. The second thing is that they mentioned that contracts should be handled by their own teams. That's something that I don't know who eventually says it will be handled by those teams, but at least there's sort of an out because from my recollection, you said that contract management is something you don't want to do, right?
Yeah, I don't want to do it.
Yeah. And so it sounds like there is a path for you to get to this level and not do that. And
I agree.
yeah, and that I don't really see any problems right now, I guess, on the face at least. Like
No, no, I think that was a good thing as well because if the role used to be basically what I want to go towards is be a manager that manages the people in the team, does a bit of working on the job himself, like do the actual coding and stuff like that.
yeah.
And of course, there's going to be some part of the job that's going to be contract management. Like I think as a manager, you always have a bit of that. So I think as my now senior described what he used to do as a manager, is kind of what I want to be. So if there's a precedent, I think it's easier to establish that again, and just talk with the other line managers and be like, hey, I got this part of the job that should be yours. Here, take it, have it.
Yep. Yep. And
So I think that sets a good precedent.
yeah, I think so too. And I think also as companies grow, I think these sorts of things can be more specialized. So maybe there is eventually, most companies start out, there's no hired lawyer or legal team. But then you get to the size of something like Microsoft, and it's like they have their own legal team. They need that. So here, you don't have a problem with doing the 10% of your role as contract management, right?
No, no, I
Okay.
actually do a small bit of it already. There's some vendors that I'm the main contact point for contracts, and if it's a small, like I still don't enjoy it,
Yeah.
but I don't find it too much trouble to get myself to do this small part of it because someone has to do it in the end.
Yep. 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 Okay, good. Because I was going to say there's no way to carve out a job that is 100% tasks that you like
No,
in pretty much any field. I think there's always something you're going to have to do that is not great. And yeah, if it's a small enough portion of your job, I think it should be fine. So this is good news. And I think, you could still talk to your current manager about this and just say, hey, look, here's the conversation I had. And
yep,
probably
I still want to do that.
yeah. And I was going to say probably too, you were just sick, your schedules didn't line. These are things that won't happen the next 11 months in a row. So at some point, you can always ask about this because you've got a timeline of like 60 months, I think, right? Because you got
Yeah.
about 5 years to ask this person before they end up retiring. And yeah, so there should be some chance. But yeah, sounds good. Sounds like good news. And I'm really glad you talked to that person. Did that help with your concern to sort of close the loop on this? Do you feel like I was worried about this? Now I'm less worried about this?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think it makes me more willing to also rise to the plate of that function.
Yeah.
Like, if I, probably over the next years, my manager will, I assume, bring it up more often with me if he is serious about me replacing him. So I think, knowing that it used to be like this, I think I can bring it up. Hey, I talked with your predecessor basically, and his role was more like this. Do you see the role becoming that again in the future?
Yep.
Like being able to bring that up, I think makes it easier for me to step into that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's another thing where I feel like, sort of in general, sometimes we don't want to know the answer to something because we're worried it'll be bad. And so we never find out. And then the worry never goes away. And so in this
Yeah.
case, maybe you were worried about a bad answer, but you asked about it anyway. And then you got the best possible news, which is like, it's pretty much what you expect, 10% of your job, and you're fine with that. So props to you for asking. I really think it's good. And yeah, you'll eventually talk to your manager. And I'm not going to write something down about that. But when you do, I'd like to hear about how that goes. So yeah.
Most definitely.
Yeah. So now this is something I'm also very excited about hearing. So you want to give the recap for this too for people who don't know?
Yeah. So something I'm really passionate about is helping others, coaching others, teaching others in any capacity I can. It's something I get a lot of joy and energy out of. So what I would like to see me do in some future is something where I can train other people or help other people become more successful in their career, their life,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they need help with. And after the first mentoring session with Adam, someone from the chat actually sent me a DM on Discord and was like, "Hey, I heard you want to mentor someone. I'm actually looking for someone, to just chat with, talk about with. Would you be willing to, quote unquote, mentor me?" Which I really appreciated from that person. So I said yes, and we had like an hour-long conversation, I think, on Discord as well, kind of like Adam and I are doing now. And even though I don't think I was necessarily mentoring him, he did say that, just talking with me and hearing about my experiences, he thought it was useful. Even though he said, like he wasn't really sure what he'd envisioned and the talk we had wasn't really what he had in mind. He still said it was useful for him. And we agreed to, probably this week or next week, we're going to have a chat again, see if we want to have a call again and just see where it goes, basically. Uh, so I think it's really hard. I think that's also what I wrote down, like stuff's hard, yo. It's really hard to be in the spot Adam is in right now. So Adam, really appreciate you doing this as well. But yeah, I think it was really nice to do and a valuable thing to do as well. Like I get a lot of energy out of doing that.
Yeah. And so, okay, one, I was gonna say because for chat's sake, Remy had told me about this over Discord. Hey, someone asked for this, but he didn't tell me at the time. I'm leaning toward doing it or I'm not. And I was thinking of saying something like, Remy, you should definitely do this. Excuse me. Remy did it anyway. I didn't need to say anything. So I think it's great that you did that. I think it's great it energized you. You mentioned your whole what was it called? Youthful my company or company name, that thing that you
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that so you mentioned this group you have at work doing something like this, but that's in a capacity where it's all at work. And so to some extent it's sort of expected. What's cool about this, I share that same tendency with you of I just like helping people. I like watching them grow. And so it does energize me too to see this and also to just like you get to hear about someone's life that might be so far from yours that it's just interesting sometimes. And so in this case, you did help that person. They liked it enough to want to do it again. I think, you touched on this over our Discord chat that you had, and you touched on it now too, that the mentee said it wasn't really what they were expecting. And I think you should ask them about that a little more next time of like, what were you expecting? What did you want to have happen? Because if if they say, well, look, I wanted specific technical help, like I'm just making things up. I'm learning Python and I don't know how functions work. Like that's very different, of course, from, hey, I need career advice or I need some guidance. And either way, I'm sure you can find a way to help them. The other thing, too, I think that I wanted to share here is that we're all just winging it. we, we don't really, know what's going on. There's
Make it
certainly
till you make it.
yeah, fake it till you make it. There are certainly trainings about this. There are books about this, and I think there's some general psychological and pedagogical advice that you could give someone that will make them a better mentor. But in the end, it's like, look, if you're helping them, then cool, you can pick some of that up as you go, just like what you mentioned with doing C# long enough to pick up some technical skills there. So, is there anything that you found that you might have struggled with that I can help you with for your next mentoring session with them?
That's hard. Uh, mm, I don't think I really paid too much attention to like was I struggling myself with anything. Like I said, I can talk to in front of a bunch of people about a blade of grass if I need to do. I'm quite an easy talker, so I'll like you say I'll just bullshit myself through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of felt like I was doing that, even though obviously I was telling the truth and just my opinion on things. So yeah, like I guess it's hard to put into words, like kind of imposter syndrome ish. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like doing it. Like I kept thinking, what makes me qualified to do this? Even though the person said like, "Hey, it was a really nice chat and I enjoyed doing this."
Yeah.
But like you said, like that never really goes away, probably.
Okay.
So yeah, like any specific. So I think it's hard to answer really. I
Yeah.
think I need to do it more often to be able to identify if I'm struggling with something.
Yeah. And so, from my own mentoring experience, I think I've had specific struggles with specific people that won't come up again with a different person. So it's not like there's some mentoring wide thing that's been a struggle for everybody. But sometimes it can be hard to pull people out of their shell. Sometimes it can be hard to get people to show up to sessions. So there are those sorts of problems which, like, okay, you figure out what works for that specific person. But then the general things that I've tried to come up with, and I've been writing some notes about this, is I think people tend to like concrete advice, something that they can go apply. So whenever I say to someone, "Hey, we've added a tool to your toolbox," it's like if I'm not keeping track of that toolbox for them, sometimes they just won't remember it and won't think of it that same way. And so, yeah, there's a concrete advice. There's, reviewing before sessions, and it's all the stuff you see. I'm not going to write all this stuff out, but it's things that you see me doing in these sessions. And so, I think the most important one, if you can ever think of a way where it's like, how can I apply a strategy to someone else's life and give that to them? I think they tend to appreciate that. So, uh,
Oh, actually, now that I see you do this, like I see you typing while talking, that's something I struggled with. I try to keep notes while doing this,
yeah,
and I just noticed like I was either focused on talking to this person or focused on writing notes and not hearing them.
yeah, and
So at the end, I was like, okay, I'm gonna review the notes I wrote, and I was like, wow, this is useless. Like,
Okay, so this is something I've heard feedback on specifically from me as well. This is not something I think you should try to work on, to be honest. I think instead I would just say keep the most valuable notes and just pause while taking them and just tell them that. So something like, suppose they mention, "Hey, my weakest point that I have is my technical skills." You might be like, "Well, okay, that sounds like something we want to work on. Give me a second." You write down weak point technical skills and you can move on from there. And that way at the end you only have the most valuable notes, and hopefully afterward you can reconstruct enough of what happened to be able. And so this is, I happen to take like transcription style notes where we can see practically, the whole conversation, at least from some of your perspective. And that helps me snap back to what happened in the conversation. And that way, when I'm reviewing it, I'm like, oh, yeah, I did want to talk about this or something. If that doesn't work for you, don't try to make that a reality, I'd say, because it'll take a while. So,
okay, noted.
yeah.
Not physically though, because I
No.
can't do it at the same time.
Okay, so there are a couple other things here, and we got about a little over 10 minutes left. Do you wanna cover some of these new topics?
Yeah. So the first one loops back to what we mentioned about, me trying to work on this new product. Is how would you approach this? Like I've tried making like I made a small design document where I tried to write down like what do I want in this? What skills do I have myself? What skills would I need to search elsewhere? Like how do you stick to this MVP? Like I said, the 10% ends up me accepting a lot of scope creep, growing the MVP out. And what is the point where you say, okay, this product isn't working, fail fast, don't invest anymore in it?
Yeah.
How do you approach something like that?
Excuse me, sorry for the coughing. So have you heard of an MVP being the smallest vertical slice through a product?
No.
Okay.
I
So
think you mentioned at some point maybe, but it
yeah.
didn't stick with me.
So there's a picture somewhere of, let's say you were trying to develop a vehicle, and it's just used as an example. So you would start by developing a scooter, right? It has two wheels and you put your foot on it and you just push yourself. Then maybe you go to a bicycle, then maybe you go to something else. It's not that you produce just like a wheel, and because it's not usable as its own product. So the MVP is sort of building up to a usable product and nothing more. And the way I look at this is it will evolve because you don't know what is viable yet. You can only know what is the minimum product. And the viability you get by either testing it in a market or by asking people about it or whatever criteria you might have. You know, for some people, it might be like it's a health product that saves their lives. Well, that's the viability of it. So in this case, it's like, well, you want a business, you want it to sustain itself. You might need to figure out, you can do this from any number of perspectives. You could try to figure out how much money does this need to make in order for it to sustain itself, because you can probably figure out exactly how many rock climbing gyms there are in the world, and that forms your customer base, and that's probably it. I don't know if there's another market for this or anything else. So
No, I think that's it. Yeah.
yeah. And so how much money would they need to spend? How much are they comfortable spending? What are the kinds of budgets they have? This is some of the research I would look into to try to figure out what kind of offering do I even need to craft for them, because you've seen a bunch of tools online that try to do one thing and that's it, and they charge, $5 a month, let's say. I don't think a $5 a month subscription would probably be sufficient for a project like this. So you probably need a premium enough feature set eventually, and yet that's not what you need initially. So I don't know a lot about rock climbing, so the advice I would give won't be very specific to that. But
That's fine.
I'd probably talk to a couple of different gyms and a couple of your friends who are interested in route planning, and I would ask them, what features would you need to have be in this product? And I'd use that to guide what your MVP is. And you probably have enough experience yourself to be able to give your own voice to that, because you can only rely on users so much for any sort of product ownership. At some point, you need to have a gut feeling and a direction, because your users will all want different things at some point. And also, there's this, I kind of don't like this quote sometimes, but there's a quote from Henry Ford which said, if I'd asked people what they would have wanted, they'd say faster horses instead of cars, because they didn't know cars could be a thing. And
Yeah.
and so you could run into that too, where people are like, well, I wanted to do this, and it's that one customer. So uh, I highlighted here sticking to an MVP. It's not so much sticking to that original vision, it's just sticking to a vision of an MVP, and it might change over time. So just make sure that you're flexible with that. And then, and talk to people and everything. So to find out what they need, definitely figure out budgets for rock climbing gyms for this. Like maybe the way that you might, hang on, sorry. The way you might be able to frame this is, how much are you paying someone right now to plan your routes? And that might backfire on you, because they might say, well, there's a lot of dead time. Well, we don't have customers here, and that's the time they use. So it's essentially free for us to do this. So now we're going to pay for your software. So you need to find a way to market this to them. And you can test this out, right? If you're friendly with your rock climbing gym, you could say something like, look, I'm working on this product. Is it even interesting? What would you want? Just go sit there with a pen and a sheet of paper and ask them this stuff.
Yeah, that's also something I wanted to look at, like, because I got this close ties to my local gyms, like, maybe get them on as like an early adapter that can, use it for free to get the feedback, but they're also part of a bigger network that, and they could bring me into maybe. And like you say, like the budgets I feel like vary, because, got like small gyms, big gyms. So I was thinking about like monetizing models where like the price is based off like how big the climbing area is, for
Mm-hmm.
example.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good. And I think this is the kind of thing you'll find out, which is like the way I sort of envision this product is, you will need to tailor the environment to whatever it is the gym has as space. And that should be easy enough to do. You could like work with them, custom make their base template. And then at that point, they can just input parameters themselves, or say which tools, or you could even have order links. You can connect with affiliates and say, hey, you want your, I don't know what you call those things, the holds maybe. You want the hold on the wall. We sell it in these colors, and I take, whatever, a 5% affiliate marketing
Yeah.
cut or something. So there are lots of ways you could sort of pursue that. Yeah. And I think it is probably a somewhat big project, and you're tackling your personal
Yeah,
time. And
definitely.
yeah, and that's where having someone else is good. I talked about this a little bit earlier with a co-founder. I think there needs to be some level of investment, roughly equal to yours. And it doesn't need to be in any of the same veins as what your investment is. Maybe they are providing money and you're providing expertise. Maybe they're providing marketing expertise and you're providing technical expertise. But I think they need to bring something to the table that you need for sure, and
Yeah.
ideally something you don't have. And finding that person is very tough. So I don't have a lot of advice there, other than that, like, it's a business relationship, and the relationship part of it is very important. and you will, you'll have fights, you'll have disagreements, you will hopefully, make up and make a product in the end.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Uh, okay, so let's definitely examine this. This is not like a one and done kind of thing. So definitely want to talk about this next time. We have a little bit more time, and I don't want to shortchange your potentially most important topic that was optional here at the end.
No, no, like it's optional here for a reason.
Yeah.
Like I felt like it's something I think is not talked about often. So I feel like if we can talk about it, it might be useful for other people.
Mhm.
So you decide if you have the time for this or not, or how long you have for this.
I
I'm fine with either.
We have about 5 minutes. I'm happy using that time, and I'm happy bumping this to next time if we complete half of it or just whatever you want to do.
Okay, I'll just talk a bit about this.
Okay.
So as I wrote down here, December, January, I feel like I wasn't mentally in the right place. I was struggling with some personal setbacks. I wasn't exercising as much. I doubted my professional skills at work. But like I said, I've been working on the C++ challenge for a while now. I felt like I wasn't making progress. Like it took me a month just to refactor the code base to get it to a point where I can do things. Uh, and I don't really celebrate my successes. I'm always like, okay, let's go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And this all, basically translated me, feeling a bit, gloomy and not putting in enough work. It felt like it would slow me down because I would get to work and I'd be like, oh, gotta work on this thing I'm not progressing on, and it kind of spiraled downwards. Uh, how do you like? Do you see those things coming for yourself? How do you deal with that? How
Yeah.
do you prevent it? Maybe.
Yeah. So this is a very complex set of topics, and I know Remy put this acknowledgement here, and I have this in the mentoring
Yep.
contract of I might talk about this stuff, but I am certainly not a professional. So take everything I say with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
I
this is your experience. Is what I'm asking,
Oh yeah,
or
yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
your
No,
take on it.
I know,
Yeah.
and I wanted to share this with chat and whoever watches this video later that like I'm not just spouting this information without those caveats. Uh, what I did, I came up with something for myself, which I want to do a YouTube video on eventually called a stress flow chart here. And we all have stresses, but we all have stresses in very specific ways, and we have ways of getting over those. And so for some people, celebrating your success might be like going out and buying a new $500 gadget or something like that. And for other people, it might be literally like a cupcake with a candle in it. And and you yourself know who you are, and you know what successes you want to celebrate and how you want to celebrate them, but you're not carving out the time for that. That in itself is it's important to do. And I even just added this for myself into my weekly tenant review, which is like, what were my successes? Because otherwise I will just ignore them and I will just barrel on. And at the end of a month, I'll say, what did I accomplish? Because I'm ignoring everything I accomplished and not saying that's not big enough. And if you serve to put yourself down, then you're relying on other people to uplift you. So you should prevent yourself from putting yourself down in the first place. And yeah, part of the way we do
Mhm.
that is by having some awareness of this. Uh, there are these other things that are coming together. There's this confluence of you, your task at work is difficult. It's something that I'm guessing you're not getting a lot of help on. It was dumped on your plate. Like there are so many different components to just that one little thing that is making it now. It's essentially like the last 10% of your other projects. You look at it and you think, I'm going to have a setback doing this. And so then you don't want to do that thing. And it's that self-repeating cycle.
Yeah.
So I, I've had tasks like that before. And whenever I have those happen, I think I just have to do it at some point. So how do I convince myself to make slow, steady progress? And I think it's that slow, steady progress and mixing in other tasks that's going to have to happen with something like this. The other thing that we've talked about briefly here is maybe there's a way that you could speed up the task itself by gaining the knowledge in a front-loaded way. And I think signs are pointing to that might be a good idea for you to pursue. Yeah, may want to get more like C++ knowledge up front. And maybe C++ is the wrong thing here. Maybe it's or
No, that's the
like
correct thing
or
for the task at hand.
okay, or refactoring, etc. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and that still won't make the task fun, by the way. It's just going to make it less painful, which it's hard to convince ourselves to do tasks like that. And then you mentioned personal setbacks too. It's like, look, part of this stress flow chart thing that I mentioned, do you notice this happening to you at this time of year in other years? Like is December and January, are they generally good times? Are they generally neutral? Do they not register on
No,
your brain?
it's neutral normally. It's like not a
Okay.
repeating cycle or
Yeah.
something for me.
Because for this time of year, this can be tough for a lot of people because generally lack of sunlight it's the holiday period, and after the holiday period, or maybe during, that can be hard for some people, or leaving people after that can be hard. So if that's not happening for you and this is just a coincidence essentially, then that's fine. I won't put more stock into that. Um, and then, so the celebrating successes, what did you do to celebrate releasing your SR Notes app?
Start a new product.
Yeah, so that's a problem, right? Like starting a new product is not an issue in itself, but yeah, like you did a great thing. Even that you stuck to your word, that you think of the personal hurdles you overcame to do that. Like that was one of the big topics we talked about in our first mentoring session is, hey, this has been a sticking point for me. And you found a way to move through that. So we're running out of time. I want to ask you this. How will you celebrate that?
I'm gonna buy myself a cupcake with a candle. I think I'd like that idea.
Okay. I mean, like, does that seem like a good celebration? You will like, you really want to do that, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I'll post about it in Discord as well.
Okay, cool.
Celebrate it with everyone. My cupcake.
Yep. He will buy a cupcake with a candle though and share a picture. Whoops.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's good. Does that seem like the kind of celebration? I just feel like it puts us in that moment for a little bit. It's like saying thank you to somebody. It can become second nature, but to some extent, it's like, yes, I do realize that I'm grateful for what this person did for me. And in this case, it's like, be nice to yourself and figure out a way to celebrate. And if this does work, hey, maybe every product launch you do, you can say, I'm going to get another candle in the cupcake. It's essentially going to be number of product launches I've had. And then eventually you need a very large sheet cake because you've made, 900 products. So,
Sounds fun, actually. Yeah.
yeah, sounds fun. Cool. We'll start a tradition. Okay, so I want to ask you one final question here, which is, how do you feel in general about this stuff? I like to just kind of end sessions with this. Are things still feeling positive and good? Do you want to continue?
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to these sessions. I think about the sessions as well. Like during the last month, I was like, oh hey, what did Adam say about this? Went back, watched the VOD a bit. Scrolled to the relative session. And like the last week, or like even 2 weeks ago, I was like, okay, what do I want to talk about next time? If I encountered something like, oh, this might be interesting to talk with Adam. So really looking forward to the sessions, and I really enjoyed the session as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, I did too. Thank you again. And we're going to do our
Thank you.
typical, clapping after the fact, but really it takes a lot of guts to be here. And even if you can stand in front of a bunch of people and talk about a blade of grass, you're still, exposing your own personal issues and business issues. So, yeah. Well, thank you,
Yeah, you're
Remy.
welcome.
And yeah, good luck. Take care.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, chat. Let's switch back to this. All right, claps for Remy. Good job, Remy. I think this is really good. I really like, there's something to be said about mentees who care that they're being mentored. And all three of my mentees right now are in that situation where I don't feel like they're taking this for granted.